welcome. Thanks for taking time out of this cool event that we're all at to come to this presentation. So I'm not nearly as smart as my co-panelists, but I'll do my best. All right. So Park Street's not your traditional data company. So we're more of a very technology focused importer and distributor, both in the U.S. and the EU. And so for my part today, just going to cover a little bit of global insights, but primarily Europe and U.S. and some of the trade relationship a little bit that we have. By the end of 2023, global beverage alcohol is forecast to reach over $21 billion. Premiumization, we're seeing as a long-term trend, especially in more developed countries. Maybe not to the rate that it was at in 2020, that spike that we saw 2020, 2021, but still a solidified trend. China's been a leader in the luxury spirits market, but the U.S. we're seeing quickly catching up, really spearheaded by the agave spirits industry, tequila and mezcal. That's forecast to add the most growth, that category, in the luxury or super premium plus categories by any individual market in the next 5 years. Spirits have been, probably like we all know, spirits have been outperforming wine and beer in some of the major markets, or taking some share from them. And then in terms of evolving brand portfolios, that's also why some of the the larger suppliers that were traditionally wine focused or beer focused, you're starting to see them implement other or get involved in the spirits industry through RTDs, spirit-based RTDs, and even spirit suppliers create their RTDs as well. So a lot of innovation and building out the portfolios to include some spirits base. And then cost of goods. If there's any brand owners here or manage the supply chain, I've heard it from numerous suppliers out there in the event as well. They can't keep the cost of goods down, so it's hard to keep their prices down, of course. That's in 2023 a reality. So the growth rate of EU spirits exports to the US, 16% growth last year. So I'm going to transition into the EU and US trade relationship a little bit, as well as the global exports. Global exports for EU spirits worldwide almost reached 10 billion in 2022. Part of that growth was the removal of the tariffs, of course, temporarily. And then some of the top categories include grape-based spirits, so like primarily cognac, whiskeys, cordials, liqueurs, and vodka. So U.S. exports to the EU, exports grew almost double that. And again, the primary reason is because of the removal of the tariffs. Also, U.S. exports to the EU were up to over 700 million in 2022, worldwide over 2 billion. And some of the top categories for export overall: whiskey, cordials, vodka, rum. And there's a level of integration between the EU and US. Some EU companies own US spirit brands. Some US companies own European spirit brands. So there's always been a large integration and alignment, across the Atlantic. So I'll go over some of the category growth rates in Europe and the US as well. Agave-based spirits, I haven't been here since BCB since 2019. And so seeing the growth of agaves here in Europe, it was quite surprising to me. I looked at the numbers, but actually seeing it firsthand at this event, at Agave Bar and all that was pretty surprising, but good to know. And gin, of course, still growing. This is over the past 5 years, right? So not since like 2021 or whatnot. We wanted to look a little bit before COVID and kind of that unique season. Rum's growing, whiskey, of course, cognac. It's showing negative, but that's probably primarily due to large export markets like China, the U.S. Some of the highest growth markets across, this isn't category specific, but across all of spirits include, since 2020 at least, since Spain, Greece, Portugal, Italy, Croatia, Austria. Of course, there's some more. Turkey's also big, not technically in Europe, but a big growth market as well. Premiumization, as I said, continues, albeit maybe normalizing to pre-pandemic, long-term trends or growth. And then moving over to the U.S., growth rates in the U.S., of course, agave actually almost doubling what it is in Europe. Whiskey growth, liqueurs and cordials is higher in the U.S. As well. And one thing to note with all of these categories, except for vodka, is a little unique because you have Tito's on the their price point. Not considering that one category, but all of these categories are growing in the premium plus price segments, right? So although you have rum that's kind of been stagnant for a while, gin's been stagnant, but if you look inside the category, the premium plus, of course, the volume is going to be the standard and below. That's greater volumes, and the premium plus segments aren't going to make up that difference, outweigh the difference of the decline in the value priced segment. But it's a good thing that's still, we still see that being a trend. I also wanted to dive a little bit into whiskey, since there's a lot of different categories with whiskey, and just mention some of the top growing subcategories: American whiskey, Irish, and Japanese. Again, this is in the U.S. There's some other origin whiskeys like Indian whiskey that are growing or have high growth rates, but the volume bases are very low, so it's not exactly comparable. And then some up and coming categories: soju and non-alcoholic spirits. I think mocktails or non-alcoholic cocktails were on Yelp's, so the restaurant review Yelp made their top 10 food trends of 2023. And as we all see right down the hall, there's like the non-alcoholic bar, so that's going to continue to be a trend. Moving on to a couple other items, more away from the data, but so Park Street, we work with companies that are involved with sustainability initiatives, as well as being heavily involved in regulatory compliance in the US and in the EU to some degree. So I'm going to kind of transition a little bit to this part as well. So a lot of different sustainability initiatives. You have companies, in terms of renewable energy, reduction of energy use, you have companies such as Diageo. Not just them, a lot of the larger suppliers have these initiatives. I've seen a lot by like 2030 to be, fully using renewable energy sources. In terms of sustainable farming, you have the Tequila Regulatory Council aiming for 100% of tequila production to be certified as deforestation-free by 2027. Beam Suntory earlier this year launched a regenerative agave program for Casa Salsa. So there's a lot of, you have Brothers Bond as well. So not just the large suppliers, Brothers Bond Bourbon is really a proponent of regenerative agriculture as well. So from smaller suppliers to larger ones. Packaging innovation. I've seen it, probably all of you have seen a bunch of this. The Frugal Pack, brands using the Frugal Pack for a different, if you're not familiar, it's the paper bottles with a pack inside, both recyclable. Meili Vodka launched earlier this year with Jason Momoa in the US, and that's fully post-consumer recycled glass. And then Eco Spirits as well with their circular economy movement that they're really spearheading. Another example, reusing byproducts and tequila, in the tequila industry at least, it's becoming more common. You see it a lot, but I've seen it firsthand, just the reuse of the agave fibers, planting agave in a more natural way. And then, of course, promotion of responsible drinking, which we should also continue. It's good for the industry. It's not something we generally talk about in these type of presentations, but I did want to mention it. I'm not going to stay on this slide long because it's not really a trend, but in case you weren't aware, there's new labeling requirements in the EU for wine that start this December, and we expect those to apply to spirits in the near future. So again, not going to go through all of those, but just be aware, be on the lookout for that because it is coming. Yeah, for beer too, probably. And just the industry outlook for 2024, expect US, Europe, China to continue to be value drivers, Mexico, Brazil, India to be volume drivers. India might be both. I think I was speaking with Graham about it earlier, just in terms of the population growth there too. So naturally it might be in line with that. But we expect there's a lot of premiumization there happening, but also volume growth happening. Agave spirits will continue to lead the pack. In terms of trade relations, that's going to have a significant impact on import exports between the US and EU territories. So if we can get the whole aluminum steel deal or a temporary solution done, should be good. If not, we'll probably see a drop like we did before. Again, premiumization still happening, definitely a solidified trend, but could be impacted by inflation and cost of goods, as I'm sure we're all seeing in our personal lives. And then the better for you movement, increased demand for no and low alcoholic beverages. Plenty of room for growth. I think with that one, there's still like a lot of people in the general public. We're all in the industry, right? So we know about that. We hear about it every day. But I think there's a lot of people that don't know there's an alternative non-alcoholic gin or non-alcoholic whiskey or that type of thing. If you just ask your general, person on the street or whatever you want to call it. So general public. So I think there's like a lot of room for growth in that category. And that's really it.